Today, we're not talking about knights and dragons. We're talking about basic physics. We're diving deep into the biggest, most expensive, most arrogant thermodynamic fuck-up of medieval architecture. We're going to answer why those thick, 5-meter stone walls, the very things that shielded the Lord from catapults and trebuchets, became massive, relentless, heat-sucking sponges. We will explore every catastrophic, bone-chilling detail, from the suicidal chimney effect of the Great Hall that literally vacuumed warmth into the sky, to the tiny, unseen fissures that created constant, high-velocity, cold air channels. We'll talk about the desperate, losing battle against the smoke, and the absolute living nightmare of the fuel bill. This isn't history. This is a survival story. Let's find out exactly how medieval residents, from the lowest scullery maid to the diamond-wearing duchess, battled every single night, just to not fucking die of hypothermia in their own goddamn stronghold. Let's get started. Forget the fairy tale image. Put yourself there. You're inside a stone monster, a quarry that's been hollowed out and given a roof. A blizzard howls outside, a Category 5 hurricane of ice, and the sound it makes against the stone is a high-pitched scream. Inside, your breath fogs in a thick white plume, not just in the morning, but all day. The cold doesn't just sit on your skin, it rapes your lungs, it clings to your bones, it makes your joints ache with a prehistoric dampness. These supposed marvels of human power and authority became winter-long refrigerators. They are enduring proof that for 1,000 years, defensive strategy beat the ever-living shit out of basic human comfort. We're unpacking exactly how the very features that repelled armies, the high walls, the narrow windows, the stone construction, ended up waging a war of attrition against their own owners, a war they almost always lost. And the primary weapon in that war wasn't a sword, it was the stone itself, which acted as a massive ice battery. This is the central problem. This is Physics 101, and the medievals failed the fucking test. Those thick stone walls, they shrugged off battering rams like they were nothing. But they also acted like a goddamn thermal sponge. In a deep winter frost, that masonry tons and tons of solid rock becomes an ice battery. It doesn't insulate, it accumulates. It sucks up the freezing-ass cold from the outside world and holds it deep within its stony, unforgiving core. Then, when you light your pathetic little fire, the walls constantly drain that hearth heat and bleed pure, unadulterated chill right back into your living space. Warmth doesn't linger. It doesn't get cozy. It's absorbed, it's murdered, and it's returned as raw misery. It's simple, brutal physics. The stone's high thermal mass means it sucks up energy. Trying to heat a castle hall was like trying to warm up a fucking NFL stadium with a single Bic lighter. But if the ice battery was the physics problem, the Great Hall was its most spectacularly stupid application. The heart of the castle wasn't a home, it was a stage. And the Great Hall was the centerpiece of this thermodynamic self-sabotage. It was a cavernous testament to conspicuous display over basic animal intelligence. Those lofty, vaulted roofs, they looked impressive as hell. They also created a harsh, unforgiving chimney effect. All your hard-won, smoky, expensive heat fucked off straight through the roof vents, sucked away into the stratosphere. And those vents? The ones designed to let the smoke out from the central fire? They were just icy glory holes, inviting Arctic drafts to sweep across the floor. You could be sitting 10 feet from a bonfire big enough to roast an ox, and your back would be freezing. You could burn an entire wagon load of wood, endure the choking smoke, and still shiver at your own feast. The cold didn't just come from above, it seeped up from the very ground you were standing on. Let's look down. What are you standing on? Packed earth or flagstone floors? You know what that is? It's a giant cold plate, directly, physically coupled to the frozen goddamn ground. There is no insulation, there is no subfloor, there is just rock and frozen mud. You think that thin layer of straw and dried herbs did fuck all? It was a joke. It was a mattress for rats and fleas, and within an hour it was damp, trampled, and useless. And look at the walls. See those arrow slits? You think those were just for archers? Bullshit. 99% of the time, they were high-velocity misery injectors. They were horizontal wind tunnels, poorly covered with a wooden board, that blasted needles of ice-cold air directly at neck level. Every ill-fitted crack in the heavy wooden doors hissed cold air at you, a constant, sharp, icy fuck you from the wind. Those little cracks were just the beginning. The entire structure was basically a leaky sieve. You think these castles were airtight? Are you high? Medieval construction leaked like a fucking sieve. These things were built by hand, with shitty, primitive mortar. Over time, that aging mortar split, cracked, and crumbled into countless microfissures, turning entire walls into porous, damp sieves. Wooden shutters? They were an amateur's attempt at a solution. They were warped, they were crude, they never fit the stone opening. They left knife-thin gaps all around the edges, and the wind screamed through them. Glass? Most people had windows of oiled cloth or scraped animal horn. They admitted only a dim, gray, soul-crushing depression and zero heat. With a house this leaky, your only defense was the fire, which was a whole other disaster. Let's talk about the fire, the noble hearth. What a crock of shit. An open central hearth, popular for centuries, an absolute disaster for efficiency. We're talking 90% of the warmth fleeing instantly upward with the smoke. The 10% that radiated outwards, it roasted you on one side while the stone monster sucked the life out of your other side. And the smoke? It was a low-hanging, choking cloud of carcinogenic soot that coated your lungs, your food, and your clothes in a sticky, black grime. Then came the wall fireplace. A massive technological leap, right? A fucking joke. It was better at sucking air up the chimney than it was at heating a room. It created its own drafts. It heated its immediate 5-foot vicinity. Step 6 feet away, and you were an ice cube again. Fire was a spectacle, but as a heating system, it was a fuel-hungry, wildly inefficient, and basically useless defense. And the fuel to feed that useless defense? That was a nightmare all its own. So, your only defense is a shitty, inefficient fire. What does that fire eat? Wood. And a castle. A castle swallowed mountains of wood. The fuel logistics were a non-stop, paralyzing nightmare. We're not talking about a nice stack on the porch. We're talking about entire forests being clear-cut, processed, and hauled by armies of peasants just to feed the beast. The right of wood was one of the most valuable things a lord could own. A sudden, heavy snowstorm cuts off the supply roads? You don't get a little chilly. You die. The household freezes. You run out of accessible forests? You turn to peat flammable bog mud that produced a choking, acrid, soupy smoke, or if you were really rich, sea coal, which was insanely expensive and toxic. Staying warm wasn't just hard, it was a crippling, backbreaking economic drain. Since they couldn't heat the whole building, they had to give up and just huddle. At some point, they just gave up. They admitted defeat. Heating the entire cavernous structure was mathematically impossible. So, they stopped trying. Privacy? Fuck privacy. That's a modern invention. In winter, everyone, the lord, his family, his knights, his servants, huddled by the one working fire in the one defensible room, the solar or the keep. It was a pig pile of humanity, dogs, and BO. They realized they had to heat bodies, not rooms. This is where tapestries come in. You think those were just pretty decorations? They were life-saving, heavy-duty insulation. They were hung all over the stone walls, not for art, but to stop the ice battery from bleeding cold onto your skin. They were building goddamn blanket forts inside their own multi-million-dollar houses. This desperation for insulation created a clear status symbol: fabric and fur. This is where you see the class system in action. More fabric meant more status, and, critically, more warmth. Fabric was the sign that the lord was rich enough to afford insulation. Heavy wool, velvet, these things were worth a fortune. A single enormous tapestry could cost more than a small farm. And then there was fur. Fur, fox, sable, ermine, bear was the ultimate medieval high-tech. It was the carbon fiber of its day. It was a portable, personal heating system. You didn't just wear it to look good. You wore it indoors. You wore it to dinner. You wore it to bed. You weren't just wearing fur. You were wearing your bank account. You were showing the world you were too rich to freeze to death. But while the rich were wearing their bank accounts, others were inventing actual technology, or just using filthy hacks. Then, finally, some smart bastard in Central Europe, probably Germany or Austria, invented the Kachelfen, the tile stove. This was the fucking future. A sealed ceramic firebox. A labyrinth of interior channels. It radiated heat. It burned fuel efficiently. It kept a room warm for hours after the fire was out. And the best part? No fucking smoke. But if you were in England or France, you were out of luck, stuck with your smoky, shitty fireplace. And if you were poor, you got the filthy hacks. Servants would heat up rocks or bricks in the kitchen fire, wrap them in cloth, and shove them into your ice-cold bed. Hot spiced wine? That wasn't for fun. It was antifreeze for your soul, a desperate attempt to feel warm from the inside out for just 5 goddamn minutes. Of course, your first and last line of defense was what you were wearing. Your clothes weren't fashion, they were your personal fortress. They were your most intimate, most critical survival system. You didn't get dressed. You put on your armor against the cold. Think layers. A linen shirt or chemise against the skin to wick the stank, because you never bathed. Then wool. Wool on top of wool. Woolen tunics, woolen stockings, woolen over-tunics. Then a heavy fur-lined mantle or surcoat on top of that. And you wore it all the time. Hats and mittens? Indoors. You think a lord took his hat off for dinner? Hell no. His ears would get frostbite. Fashion? Fuck fashion. This was survival. You wore everything you owned, all at once, and you probably stank to high heaven. When this personal fortress wasn't enough, you retreated to the final citadel, the bed. The bed wasn't a place for sex. It was a goddamn survival tool. It was a fortress within the fortress. We're talking a massive 4-poster bed built like a tank. It had a tester, a solid wooden roof, to stop cold air and, no joke, rats from falling on your face. And it had thick, heavy curtains, often lined with fur. You didn't just go to bed. You climbed inside and sealed the tent. You were creating an airtight box to trap the body heat of everyone inside. Before crawling in, servants threw warming pans, metal pans full of glowing embers, or boiling hot water bottles in between the ice-cold linen sheets, and you never slept alone. Spouses, kids, favored servants, even hunting dogs. It was a pig pile of humanity, all crammed into one fabric box, just to stay alive until morning. This entire struggle hinged on one single critical resource: fuel. Imagine being the castle steward. You're the accountant, but you're not guarding gold. You're guarding the wood pile. The fuel pile was the most strategic resource in the entire castle, more important than the wine cellar or the armory. Run out of wood, you burn peat. Run out of peat, you burn dried shit. Literally, dried animal dung patties. They did it. They burned shit inside their homes to stay warm. A small miscalculation in your fuel budget, one bad storm that blocks the forest path, and the entire household, the lord, the lady, the knights, freezes. The pressure was immense. Eventually, after centuries, they finally started to patch this broken game. After centuries of freezing their collective balls off, builders finally got smart. It was like a late-game software patch for architecture. Hey guys, someone finally said, maybe these giant 50-foot ceiling rooms are a stupid fucking idea. They started designing smaller, more intimate rooms. Lower ceilings to trap the heat. They added permanent wooden wainscoting and paneling to the walls, acting as a built-in permanent tapestry. They invented screens passages, an airlock for your front door to stop the wind from shotgun blasting the main hall every time someone entered. They started building actual heating systems, instead of just big cold stone boxes to show off in. It only took them about 500 years. But in the end, it was never one thing. It was a total war of survival. Here's the takeaway. No single solution ever conquered the cold. It was a stacked strategy. It was a desperate, relentless shit show of relentless hacks, one piled on top of the other, just to make it to sunrise. It was a constant, losing war fought with textiles, smoke, body heat, booze, and meticulous, paranoid planning. Warmth in a medieval castle was never guaranteed. It was never a given. It was earned every single goddamn night through pure, stubborn, miserable effort. So next time you see a picture of a castle, don't think majestic, think icebox, think misery, and go thank your goddamn thermostat. What historical lie do you want us to drag into the light next? Drop it in the comments, and if you can handle the truth, make sure to like and subscribe.